Most people wait for motivation. They believe that one day they will wake up feeling inspired, ready, and full of energy. They think success begins with a feeling, but the truth is very different. Motivation is unpredictable. Some days you feel it. Most days you don't. And that's where most people lose. Arif was one of those people. Every time he watched a motivational video, he felt powerful, excited, ready to change his life. He would make plans, set goals, promise himself that tomorrow would be different. But tomorrow came, and nothing changed. The alarm rang. He felt tired. He pressed snooze. The motivation was gone. This cycle repeated again and again. Motivation came like a wave, strong but temporary, and when it left, it took everything with it. Arif started noticing something strange. Every time he felt motivated, he made big promises, but when that feeling disappeared, he broke them. And slowly, he stopped trusting himself. That was the real damage, not failure, but lost self-trust. One night, after another unproductive day, Arif sat alone in his room. No music, no videos, no distractions, just silence. He asked himself a simple question. Why do I keep failing even when I want to change? The answer didn't come immediately, but when it did, it changed everything. Because the problem wasn't lack of desire, it wasn't lack of dreams, it was something else, something deeper. Arif realized he was depending on motivation, and motivation was unreliable. That night, he wrote one sentence in his notebook. Motivation starts you, discipline finishes you. He didn't fully understand it yet, but he knew one thing. If he continued waiting for motivation, nothing would change. And that realization was the beginning of something new.
Arif couldn't stop thinking about that sentence. Motivation starts you. Discipline finishes you. It sounded simple, but the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. For years, he had been chasing motivation, waiting for that perfect feeling, that sudden burst of energy, that moment when everything feels possible, and every time it came, he believed, this is it. This time I will change. This time I will be consistent. This time I will succeed. But every time, it faded. That was the problem. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings don't last. One morning, Arif woke up early, not because he had to, but because he felt motivated. He jumped out of bed, made a plan, started working. Everything felt perfect. This is what he had been waiting for. But by afternoon, something changed. The energy dropped, focus disappeared, excuses started coming. I'll do it later. I need a break. I'll continue tomorrow. And just like that, the day was gone. Again. That's when Arif noticed something dangerous. Motivation doesn't just disappear, it tricks you. It gives you a false sense of control. It makes you believe you are making progress, when in reality, you are only feeling progress, and those are not the same. Real progress happens when you work, even when you don't feel like it. But Arif wasn't doing that. He was working only when he felt ready, and that meant he was inconsistent. Some days he worked hard, other days, nothing. No structure, no system, just emotions. And emotions are unstable. That realization hit him hard because he finally saw the truth. He wasn't failing because he was lazy. He was failing because he had no discipline. He depended on motivation, and motivation had no rules. That night, Arif did something different. He didn't watch a motivational video. He didn't listen to music. He didn't try to feel inspired. Instead, he observed himself. He noticed a pattern. Whenever something felt difficult, he stopped. Whenever something felt boring, he avoided it.
Whenever something required effort, he delayed it. He wasn't weak, he was untrained. His mind had been trained to follow comfort, not progress, and comfort is the enemy of growth. That's when Arif understood something powerful. Discipline is not about motivation, it's about control. Control over your actions, control over your habits, control over your decisions, even when you don't feel like it. But that was the hardest part, because acting without motivation feels uncomfortable, it feels forced, it feels unnatural. And that's why most people don't do it. They wait. They wait to feel ready. But readiness is a trap, because if you wait to feel ready, you will wait forever. Arif knew he had to change something. Not his goals, not his dreams, but his system. The way he approached work, the way he approached effort, the way he approached discomfort. The next morning, he tested something. He didn't wait for motivation. He didn't check how he felt. He simply started working. At first, it felt heavy, slow, uncomfortable. His mind resisted, tried to distract him, tried to stop him, but he didn't stop. Not because he felt strong, but because he made a decision to act regardless of feeling. Minutes passed, then an hour, and something interesting happened. The work became easier, focus improved, energy returned. But this time, it didn't come first, it came after action. That was the moment Arif understood everything. Motivation doesn't create action. Action creates motivation. He had been doing it backwards his whole life, waiting to feel motivated before starting, instead of starting and letting motivation follow. That one shift changed everything, because now he didn't need to wait anymore. He didn't need to feel ready. He just needed to start, even when it was hard, even when it was boring, even when it was uncomfortable. That was discipline, and Arif was finally beginning to understand it. But understanding something is not the same as mastering it, because what comes next is always harder. Action, consistency, and that is where most people fail. Arif thought understanding discipline would make things easier. It didn't. In fact, it made things harder, because now he knew what to do, but doing it was a different story. The next morning, the alarm rang, 5:30 a.m. His eyes opened slowly. For a second, everything was clear. This is the moment, he thought. Then came the voice. Just 5 more minutes. It's too early. You can start tomorrow. The same voice that had controlled him for years. The voice of comfort. Before, Arif used to listen to it without thinking. It felt natural, normal, safe. But today was different. Today he was aware. He recognized the voice, and for the first time, he questioned it. Why should I listen to you? The voice didn't answer. It didn't need to, because it wasn't logical, it was emotional, and emotions are powerful. Arif sat up slowly. His body felt heavy. His mind resisted. Everything inside him wanted to go back to sleep. And that's when he realized something important. Discipline doesn't feel good. It feels uncomfortable. It feels forced. It feels like resistance. And that's exactly why it works. Because growth lives on the other side of discomfort. Arif got out of bed, not because he wanted to, but because he decided to. That small action was a victory, the first real one. But the battle didn't end there. It had just begun. Throughout the day, the same fight continued. Work versus distraction, focus versus comfort, action versus delay. Every moment was a choice, and every choice felt like effort. At his desk, Arif tried to work, but his mind wandered. He reached for his phone, paused, then remembered his decision. No. He put the phone down, returned to work. Minutes later, the urge came again. Scroll, check notifications, escape. Again he resisted. Again he chose discipline. Each time felt like a small war, invisible, silent, but intense. And that's the truth nobody talks about. Discipline isn't one big decision. It's hundreds of small decisions made every day. Most people think successful people are different, stronger, more motivated. But that's not true. They just win more of these small battles. And those small wins build something powerful: control. After a few days, something interesting happened. The resistance didn't disappear, but it became familiar. Arif knew what to expect. He knew the voice would come. He knew the discomfort would appear. But now he was ready for it. And that changed everything. Because when you expect resistance, you don't fear it, you face it. Slowly, Arif started building a routine. Wake up early, start working, avoid distractions, stay consistent. Not perfectly, but consistently. Some days were harder. Some days he failed, but he didn't quit. That was the difference. Before, one bad day would break everything. Now, one bad day was just a day. He continued, and over time, something powerful started forming. Not motivation, not excitement, something deeper: discipline. It didn't feel dramatic. There was no sudden transformation, no big moment, just small, repeated actions, day after day. And that's what made it strong. Because discipline is built quietly, while nobody is watching, while nothing seems to be happening. But something is. Inside. Arif noticed another change. His confidence started growing, not because of success, but because of consistency. For the first time, he trusted himself. When he said he would do something, he did it. And that feeling was powerful. Because self-trust is everything. Without it, nothing lasts. But with it, everything becomes possible. Arif looked back at his old self, the one who waited for motivation, the one who made promises but didn't keep them. And he realized something. The biggest change was not in his results, it was in his identity. He was becoming someone different, someone who acts, someone who shows up, someone who doesn't wait. And that identity would change his future. But the journey was far from over, because discipline is not tested when things are easy. It is tested when life becomes difficult. And that test was coming soon.
For a while, everything seemed under control. Arif had built a routine. He was waking up early, working consistently, avoiding distractions. Day by day, he was improving. Not dramatically, but steadily. And that gave him confidence. For the first time, he felt like he was in control of his life. But life doesn't stay easy for long. 1 week changed everything. It started with pressure at work. Deadlines increased, tasks piled up, unexpected problems appeared. Arif found himself working longer hours, coming home exhausted, mentally drained, physically tired. The routine he built started breaking. The alarm rang. He ignored it. Just today, he said. The next day, again. Just this week. Slowly, the discipline started slipping. Not because he didn't care, but because it became harder. This is where most people fail. Not at the beginning, but in the middle. When things get difficult. When life gets heavy. When energy drops. That's when motivation disappears completely. And if you depend on motivation, you stop. Arif felt it happening. The old patterns started returning, skipping work, delaying tasks, choosing comfort.
For a moment, it felt easier, less pressure, less effort. But something inside him noticed the difference. He wasn't progressing anymore. He was going backwards. That feeling was familiar, too familiar. It was the same feeling he had before, stuck, lost, disconnected. And that scared him, because now he knew what that life felt like, and he didn't want to go back. One night, after another unproductive day, Arif sat alone again. The same silence, the same room, but a different version of himself. This time, he wasn't confused. He understood what was happening. He wasn't losing discipline. He was being tested. And that changed everything. Because now the situation had meaning. It wasn't failure. It was a challenge, a test of everything he had built. The next morning, the alarm rang. Same time, same resistance, same voice. You're tired. You deserve rest. Start tomorrow. But this time, Arif didn't argue. He didn't think. He didn't wait. He acted. He got up. Not because it felt good, not because he had energy, but because he made a decision to continue, even when it's hard. That was the real definition of discipline. Not doing things when it's easy, but doing them when it's difficult. The day felt heavy. Everything required effort. Even small tasks felt hard. But Arif kept moving, step by step, hour by hour. No perfection, just action. And something interesting happened. By the end of the day, he felt stronger, not physically, but mentally, because he had proven something to himself, that he could continue even when he didn't feel like it. That moment was more important than any success because it built something deeper, resilience, the ability to continue under pressure. Most people never build that because they stop when things get hard, but Arif didn't, and that made him different. The next few days were still challenging. Work pressure didn't disappear. Life didn't get easier, but Arif changed how he responded. He stopped expecting things to be easy. He accepted difficulty. And when you accept something, it stops controlling you. That shift was powerful because now discipline wasn't a struggle. It was a standard, something he followed no matter what. Slowly, the routine returned, stronger, more stable, more real, not based on feeling, but based on decision. Arif realized something important. Motivation is temporary, but discipline, built during hard times, and once it's built, it doesn't disappear easily. But the biggest transformation was still ahead, because discipline doesn't just change your actions, it changes your life. And Arif was about to see that. Arif didn't notice the change immediately. There was no sudden moment, no dramatic breakthrough, no instant success. At first, everything felt the same. Same room, same work, same routine. But something was different. Inside. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and slowly the results started appearing. Not all at once, not loudly, but quietly. His focus improved. Tasks that once felt difficult became normal. He didn't need to force himself as much because discipline had become a habit, and habits change everything. Arif started finishing his work faster, making fewer mistakes, staying consistent. While others depended on mood, he depended on structure, and structure gave him stability. That stability created progress. For the first time, Arif saw real growth, not emotional, not temporary, but real. His confidence changed, not because of motivation, but because of proof. He had evidence, evidence that he could show up even when it was hard. That feeling is powerful because confidence built on action is unbreakable. People around him started noticing. You've changed. You're more focused. You're more serious." Arif smiled, because they were right, but they didn't see the real change. They saw the result, not the process. They didn't see the mornings he didn't want to wake up, the days he forced himself to work, the moments he chose discipline over comfort. That's the invisible part, the part nobody sees, but that part builds everything. Arif realized something important. Success is not visible at the beginning. It grows quietly, in habits, in routines, in decisions, and one day it becomes visible. That's what was happening now. Opportunities started appearing, small at first, then bigger, because people trust consistency, and Arif was consistent. He wasn't perfect. He still had bad days, but he didn't stop. That was the difference. Before, a bad day meant failure. Now, a bad day meant nothing, because he continued. That mindset changed everything. Arif was no longer chasing motivation. He didn't need it anymore, because discipline replaced it. And discipline is reliable. It doesn't depend on feelings. It depends on decisions. That shift gave him freedom. Freedom from waiting, freedom from excuses, freedom from inconsistency. And that freedom created growth. One evening, Arif sat quietly again, the same place, the same silence, but a completely different person. He looked back at his old self, the one who waited, the one who depended on feeling, the one who started and stopped, and he realized something powerful. The biggest change was not in his life, it was in him. He had become someone who acts, someone who shows up, someone who doesn't wait. That identity is what creates success, because once you become disciplined, you don't go back. You don't need motivation. You don't need perfect conditions. You just move forward every day. That's when Arif understood the truth. Motivation is a spark. Discipline is the fire, and only the fire can keep you going. Arif didn't suddenly become successful. There was no single moment where everything changed overnight. But something more powerful happened. He became consistent. And consistency is rare, very rare. Most people start strong, excited, motivated, full of energy, but they don't last. They stop, they slow down, they lose focus, and eventually they quit. Arif used to be like that, but not anymore. Now he showed up every day, whether he felt like it or not, whether he was tired or not, whether things were easy or not. That one change made all the difference. At work, people started noticing. While others waited for the right mood, Arif worked. While others got distracted, Arif stayed focused. While others made excuses, Arif delivered results. Slowly, he stood out, not because he was more smart, not because he was more talented, but because he was more consistent. And consistency always wins. Opportunity started finding him. Small responsibilities at first, then bigger ones. Projects that others couldn't handle were given to him because he was reliable. And reliability is rare. Most people want success, but very few want discipline, because discipline is boring, repetitive, uncomfortable. There's no excitement, no instant reward, just work again and again. But that's exactly why it works, because most people avoid it. Arif embraced it, and that made him different. One day, a colleague asked him something. "How do you stay so motivated every day?" Arif smiled, because he knew the answer. "I'm not motivated, I'm disciplined," he said. That answer confused him, but it was the truth. Arif no longer depended on feelings. He depended on systems, daily routines, clear actions, consistent effort. That system removed the need for motivation because everything was already decided. No thinking, no waiting, just action. That's the power of discipline. It simplifies everything. As time passed, the gap between Arif and others grew, not quickly, but steadily. While others stayed in the same place, he moved forward. While others repeated the same mistakes, he improved. While others talked about change, he became the change. That difference became visible, not just to him, but to everyone. And with visibility came recognition. He was trusted more, respected more, valued more. But Arif didn't focus on that because he knew something important. Recognition is a result, not a goal. His focus remained the same: daily action, daily discipline, daily progress. That's what got him here, and that's what would take him further. One evening, Arif looked around at his environment. Everything felt familiar, but also different, because he was no longer the same person. He wasn't chasing success anymore. He was building it, step by step, day by day. And that's when he realized something powerful. Discipline doesn't just change your habits, it changes your position in life. It separates you from the average, from the distracted, from the inconsistent, and places you among the few who actually move forward. But the journey wasn't finished, because discipline doesn't stop. It evolves, it grows, and the next stage was about to test Arif in a new way, not through failure, but through success. And that test is even harder. Arif sat quietly one evening. No distractions, no noise, just silence. The same silence where everything once started. But this time, he wasn't the same person. He looked back at his journey. Not the big moments, not the visible results, but the small ones. The mornings he didn't want to wake up, but did. The days he felt tired, but worked. The moments he wanted to quit, but continued. Those were the real moments. The ones nobody saw, the ones nobody talks about, but the ones that build everything. Arif realized something powerful. Success is not built in public. It is built in private, in discipline, in routine, in decisions that nobody celebrates, that nobody notices, that nobody understands. For years, he thought motivation was the key, that feeling, that excitement, that energy. But now, he saw the truth clearly. Motivation is temporary. It comes and goes. It feels good, but it doesn't last. And anything that doesn't last cannot build something that lasts. Discipline is different. It doesn't feel exciting. It doesn't give instant reward, but it stays. It remains. It works every day, even when nothing feels right. And that's what makes it powerful. Arif understood something deeper. Most people fail because they lack ability. They fail because they lack consistency. They start, they stop. They try, they quit, again and again. Not because they are weak, but because they depend on motivation. And motivation cannot carry you far. It can push you, but it cannot sustain you. Only discipline can do that. That realization changed how Arif saw everything: success, failure, effort, time. He no longer asked himself, "Do I feel like doing this?" He asked, "Does this move me forward?" That one question removed emotion, removed excuses, removed delay, and replaced it with clarity. Clarity creates action, and action creates results, slowly, quietly, inevitably. Arif looked at his life now, not perfect, not easy, but stable, consistent, progressing, and he knew exactly why. Because he had changed one thing, not his goals, not his environment, but his behavior. He stopped waiting and started doing. That's it. Simple, but powerful. Because most people never make that shift. They wait for the perfect moment, the right mood, the ideal condition. But those things don't exist. There is no perfect time. There is no perfect feeling. There is only decision and action and repetition. That's how discipline is built. And once it's built, everything changes. Arif stood up slowly, walked to the window, looked outside. The city was moving, people rushing, life continuing. Some chasing dreams, some avoiding effort, some waiting, some acting. And that's the difference. Not talent, not luck, not opportunity, but action, consistent action. Arif smiled quietly, because now he understood something most people don't. Discipline is freedom. Freedom from excuses, freedom from inconsistency, freedom from waiting. And once you have that freedom, nothing can stop you, because you no longer depend on how you feel. You depend on what you do, and what you do defines everything. Arif sat quietly one evening. No distractions, no noise, just silence. The same silence where everything once started. But this time, he wasn't the same person. He looked back at his journey. Not the big moments, not the visible results, but the small ones. The mornings he didn't want to wake up, but did. The days he felt tired, but worked. The moments he wanted to quit, but continued. Those were the real moments. The ones nobody saw, the ones nobody talks about, but the ones that build everything. Arif realized something powerful. Success is not built in public. It is built in private, in discipline, in routine, in decisions that nobody celebrates, that nobody notices, that nobody understands. For years, he thought motivation was the key, that feeling, that excitement, that energy. But now, he saw the truth clearly. Motivation is temporary. It comes and goes. It feels good, but it doesn't last. And anything that doesn't last cannot build something that lasts. Discipline is different. It doesn't feel exciting. It doesn't give instant reward, but it stays. It remains. It works every day, even when nothing feels right. And that's what makes it powerful. Arif understood something deeper. Most people fail because they lack ability. They fail because they lack consistency. They start, they stop. They try, they quit, again and again. Not because they are weak, but because they depend on motivation. And motivation cannot carry you far. It can push you, but it cannot sustain you. Only discipline can do that. That realization changed how Arif saw everything: success, failure, effort, time. He no longer asked himself, "Do I feel like doing this?" He asked, "Does this move me forward?" That one question removed emotion, removed excuses, removed delay, and replaced it with clarity. Clarity creates action, and action creates results, slowly, quietly, inevitably. Arif looked at his life now, not perfect, not easy, but stable, consistent, progressing, and he knew exactly why. Because he had changed one thing, not his goals, not his environment, but his behavior. He stopped waiting and started doing. That's it. Simple, but powerful. Because most people never make that shift. They wait for the perfect moment, the right mood, the ideal condition. But those things don't exist. There is no perfect time. There is no perfect feeling. There is only decision and action and repetition. That's how discipline is built. And once it's built, everything changes. Arif stood up slowly, walked to the window, looked outside. The city was moving, people rushing, life continuing. Some chasing dreams, some avoiding effort, some waiting, some acting. And that's the difference. Not talent, not luck, not opportunity, but action, consistent action. Arif smiled quietly, because now he understood something most people don't. Discipline is freedom. Freedom from excuses, freedom from inconsistency, freedom from waiting. And once you have that freedom, nothing can stop you, because you no longer depend on how you feel. You depend on what you do, and what you do defines everything.